Now, today is the last day of the G7 summit. It's the gathering of the leaders of the group of 7 leading industrial nations. And today, just like the past 2 days of the summit, going to be dominated by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Talks centered around that, especially so because a Russian missile struck a crowded mall in central Ukraine on Monday. At least 13 people were killed. 17. Now, the G7 leaders, they branded it a war crime. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, speaking at the gathering being held in the Bavarian Alps, said the attack just demonstrated the depths of Putin's cruelty. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that Russia had broken all the rules.
Und als G7 sind wir uns einig in der Einschätzung, dass es deshalb sich hier um sehr lang anhaltende Veränderungen dreht, die die internationalen Beziehungen auch für sehr, sehr lange Zeit prägen werden. Deshalb ist auch klar, im Verhältnis zu Russland kann es kein Zurück geben in die Zeit vor dem russischen Überfall auf die Ukraine. Denn wenn die Lage sich verändert, müssen auch wir uns verändern. Das wissen alle sehr genau. Und alle G7-Staaten sind dazu auch bereit, die notwendigen Entscheidungen zu treffen.
The United States and its G7 partners, that is Canada, France, UK, Japan, Germany and Italy, they're seeking to tighten economic sanctions on Moscow, even as soaring energy and food prices drive up global inflation. The leaders are discussing a price cap on Russian oil imports and sanctions targeting Russia's defense sector. But European officials fear difficulty in implementation. On Sunday, the G7 announced plans to stop imports of Russian gold. Ukrainian President Zelensky also addressed the leaders virtually and urged them to intensify sanctions to help end the war before winter. The G7 summit will be immediately followed by a NATO meeting in Spain, where Ukraine is once again expected to dominate the agenda. Now, it's the last day of the G7 summit. It's a gathering of the leaders of the group of 7 leading industrial nations. And we've seen that in the past 2 days, the summit has been dominated by discussions on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And today doesn't seem to be much different, especially in the backdrop of a Russian missile strike on a crowded mall in central Ukraine on Monday that killed at least 13 people. And for more on this, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal is joining us live from Germany. Thank you so much for joining us, Siddhant. Now, can you just begin by bringing us up to speed with the key highlights of the past 2 days and what the discussions are going to look like further as well? We know this is going to be followed by a NATO summit. So what can we expect going forward?
Well, today is the last day of the G7 summit here in Germany, but last 2 days have been hectic. First, in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine that dominated every aspect of the meeting. In fact, we saw the joint statement being released by the G7 leaders, a 6-page long joint statement saying that they will support Ukraine and condemned Russia, and also said that on food security they are going to support Ukraine in every manner. But also a late night statement condemning those missile strikes by Russia in Ukraine. But largely the other key aspect was the retreat where the 5 leaders of Global South, including Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, participated. We saw a statement on resilient democracies which focused on how civil societies and the freedom of expression when it comes to media should be upheld. So a lot of activity, but the big question is, what can G7 deliver on the ground in terms of supporting President Zelensky, who also was part of the G7 in terms of his virtual participation. And one key thing he focused on was on defense support, something that the Americans are working on, a package in terms of providing military support to Ukraine.
Right, absolutely, Siddhant. Now, do stay on with us. We will come back to you. But just to bring our viewers up to speed, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has departed from Germany, where he attended the G7 summit at the invitation of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Now, Prime Minister Modi departed from Munich after 2 days of hectic bilaterals and discussions on climate change. Prime Minister Modi will also pay his condolences, and now he's going to the UAE, and he will pay his condolences to the passing away of Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Now, let's just go back to our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibbal. Siddhant, thank you so much for staying on with us. Now, you touched on this earlier. Let's talk about Prime Minister Modi's visit and how crucial India's participation was. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's participation at the G7 was indeed important, given the fact that India is a large economy in the global south, and its voice does matter when it comes to global affairs. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi participated for the third time at the G7, and clearly his focus was on climate change. He proposed certain measures and, of course, highlighted how it should become part and parcel of a lifestyle. But we saw a lot of informal moments with President Macron, with President Biden, moments, of course, that showed that how there was a personal chemistry that exists between the Indian Prime Minister and world leaders. He had bilaterals as well. The Canadian bilateral was interesting, given the fact that relationship between Ottawa and New Delhi hasn't been faring very well last 2 years. We saw the relationship seeing a lot of friction. The Canadian Prime Minister had made comments during the farmer protest in 2020, and that had led to India summoning the then Canadian High Commissioner to India, Nadir Patel. So largely it was a packed day for the Indian Prime Minister here in Germany yesterday, and focus from the Indian side was to increase engagement, particularly when India is going to host G20 next year. And that is why the meeting with the Indonesian president was also another standout, given that Indonesia hosts G20 this year.
Right. All right, Siddhant, well, thank you so much for joining us and bringing us up to speed with all that has happened so far. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.